I'm not the kind of man who looks for trouble. I don't chase drama, I don't start fights, and I've never been the guy who exposes anyone. But the night I told my boss, I found the error. Something shifted in the room. Something small, quiet, and wrong. You ever see a grown man panic without moving a muscle? Because that's exactly what he did. And that was the moment I realized I had stepped on something I wasn't supposed to touch. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind where the office feels too still, where the printers go silent, and every click of a mouse echoes across the cubicles. Most people had already left, just the cleaning staff, two interns finishing some last-minute tasks, and me. I like staying late, not out of ambition, but because the empty office felt easier than going home to a silent apartment and a dinner that tasted like cardboard no matter what I cooked. Work was predictable. People weren't. I was reviewing quarterly adjustments for the Clean Systems Initiative, one of those polished internal projects companies love bragging about. Efficiency, transparency, modern workflows, the kind of thing you could slap on a brochure. My job was simple. Make sure the numbers match the approvals to the transactions, and match the transactions to the audit trail. Usually it was boring in the way a long walk is boring. You don't think about the steps, you just move. But then one line didn't match, not dramatically, not enough that anyone else would have cared. Just a quiet discrepancy, a number that should have been 43.88, but showed up as 16,320.88 in the processed ledger. At first I assumed a typo. Fat fingers, someone hit the wrong key, happens all the time. But when I pulled up the raw transactions, my stomach felt like it tightened around itself. There were two entries for the same vendor, same date, same authorization timestamp. Two identical transactions except for the amount. A double. I froze. Doubles never happen in our system. It's designed to block duplicates automatically. I double-checked the ID numbers. No mismatch. I checked again. Same result. My hands went a little numb, the way they do when your brain gets ahead of your body. I don't panic easily, but I knew something was off. I opened the access log. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The edit came from an account that should have been locked at 7 p.m. sharp. It was 7:42. Mason's account. My boss? I sat there for a long minute, just listening to the hum of the air conditioning. I wasn't supposed to dig further, but when something doesn't align, I can't pretend it does. It's like a loose thread. I have to pull it. I opened the monthly batch, and suddenly there were more doubles. Small ones, subtle ones, spread out carefully across different departments, different dates. Someone had taken time to hide them. Someone smart. Someone who knew the system better than most. Someone who had access. By the time I leaned back in my chair, it wasn't one error anymore. It was a pattern. Clean, precise, intentional. And if I'd seen it, then someone else could have seen it too. Or maybe they had. And stayed quiet. I saved the report, locked it behind my personal encryption, and stood up. My palms were sweating. I'm not a man who sweats easily. I don't overthink. I don't jump to conclusions. But even a quiet man can recognize a bad sign. The corridor to Mason's office felt longer than usual. The cleaning lady was vacuuming near the elevators, her machine drowning out the echo of my steps. His office was lit. He was inside, scrolling on his phone, half sitting, half leaning against the desk, like he owned gravity itself. "Still here?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," I said. "Found something in the quarterly report." That should have been nothing. We talk about errors all the time. He should have nodded, waved a hand, asked me to send it to him. Instead, he froze for half a second. Just half. But I noticed. He lowered his phone slowly. "What kind of something?" I swallowed. "A double transaction." His eyes twitched before his mouth did. "A what?" "The same entry twice. Different amounts." He blinked once. Hard. "And you're sure?" "That's why I'm here," I said. "Thought you'd want to take a look." He stood too fast, gripped the edge of the desk. The wood creaked. A little bead of sweat slid down his temple. He wiped it off like someone wipes away evidence. You checked the batch file? His voice wasn't calm, just pretending. Yes, I said slowly. And the access logs. A red flag. A huge one. He shouldn't have asked that. Not unless he already knew. I did, I said. Why would you... He stopped mid-sentence as if he heard himself. Never mind. It's probably nothing. Just a processing delay. I waited for him to breathe normally. He didn't. He straightened his tie 3 times in a row. A nervous tick I'd seen only once before, when HR asked him to explain why he'd lost a client contract. Send me the report, he said, too quickly, too rigidly. Sure, I said. And Evan, his tone sharpened, don't mention this to anyone. We don't want to start unnecessary confusion. That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Because he wasn't worried about confusion. He was worried about discovery. I left his office feeling like the carpet had turned into thin ice. The cleaning ladies shut off the vacuum and looked at me like she'd overheard something she wished she hadn't. Maybe she sensed it, the wrongness. I went back to my desk and sat down, letting the quiet swallow me. I didn't know exactly what I had stepped into, but I knew one thing. It wasn't just an error, and Mason wasn't just nervous. He was hiding something, and whatever it was, I had already touched it. The next morning, the office looked exactly the same. Same gray carpet, same humming lights, same smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. But once you notice a crack in the wall, you can't unsee it, no matter how much paint they throw over it. And that conversation with Mason, that was just the beginning. He called a quick team huddle at 9:05 a.m. We almost never had those. He stood at the end of the row of desks with his hands clasped, like he'd just come from a leadership seminar. All right, folks, he said, fake casual. We're restructuring workflows a bit, just to streamline. Streamline. Corporate word for I'm moving pieces without explaining why. He started assigning tasks. The big reconciliation files I'd been handling for the last 2 years shifted to Kira, the newest analyst. The audit trail reviews given to Daniel, who was good with numbers but terrified of conflict. Me? Evan will focus on small vendor maintenance and support tickets, he said. You're detail-oriented. It's a good fit. Small vendor maintenance. That was the bottom of the barrel. The stuff you give interns so they don't break anything important. I blinked once, slowly. Is this temporary? I asked him. He smiled. Just enough teeth to be condescending. We'll see how it goes. For now, I need you out of the bigger queues. Too much on your plate. I almost laughed. Too much on my plate. He'd just scraped off everything with a real view of the numbers. After the huddle, people scattered back to their screens. Kira shot me an apologetic look, like she'd been handed my seat at the table and didn't know where to put her hands. Daniel avoided my eyes completely. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my email. My access to the Clean Systems Initiative folder was gone. Just like that. Grayed out, access denied. He didn't even wait an hour. I stared at the error message for a long second. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, not a confrontation, a quiet removal. Around 11, I got a calendar invite from Mason. Check in, 15 minutes. No agenda, no notes. Just a blue block dropped into my day like a warning. His door was halfway open when I walked down the hall. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. So, he started, leaning back. I wanted to clarify yesterday about that error you mentioned. I noticed the way he said error like it belonged in air quotes. I sent you the report, I said. He nodded. There was a printed copy on his desk. It was folded in half, like he didn't want to look at the whole thing at once. I reviewed it, he said. And you're right. There are some odd entries. But I talked to upper management, and they're aware. It's part of a confidential adjustment process. Nothing for you to worry about. He said it too smoothly, like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. The problem was, I knew our structure. There is no such thing as a confidential adjustment process, that routes through one man's login after hours. Who in upper management? I asked. He smiled again. You don't need to chase this, Evan. That's not what I asked. Some of the friendliness drained from his eyes then. There it was. The irritation, the little flash of know your place. Look, he said, lowering his voice, you're good at what you do, but sometimes you dig a bit too deep. You see things that aren't there. I saw duplicate entries, I said. They're literally there. His jaw tightened. He tapped his pen on the desk, once, twice, 3 times. Do you trust me? He asked suddenly. It was such a strange question in that context that I almost laughed again. Do I trust the man whose login makes money appear twice? I trust the system, I said, and the system shows edits, made under your account after hours. He stared at me like he was deciding whether to play nice or flip the table. All right, he said finally. I'll be blunt. You digging into this could cause unnecessary issues. For you. For the team. For people who've worked very hard to get us where we are. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let something go and focus on your lane. There it was. Not a suggestion. A warning wrapped in concern. Is that an instruction? I asked. It's advice, he replied. From your manager. Take it seriously. I left his office with my pulse in my ears. Not racing, just loud. By lunchtime, the whispers had started. 2 people went quiet when I walked past the kitchenette. Someone had obviously told a version of the story where I was the problem. The paranoid one. The overthinker. The guy who couldn't read the room. That stung more than I expected. I'm not a troublemaker. I don't like being the center of anything, especially not gossip. I eat at my desk, answer my emails, go home. That's the deal I made with life. Now I was suddenly the subject of side eyes. In the afternoon, I tried to bury myself in the small vendor maintenance Mason had given me. It was like trying to fall asleep on a burning couch. Every small invoice I opened reminded me of the big numbers he'd taken out of my sight. Around 3:30, my screen flickered. For a second, I thought it was just the monitor, but then a pop-up appeared. Your session has been terminated by an administrator. I logged back in. Half my historical folders were gone. Years of reconciliations, audit notes, patterns I knew by heart, wiped from my view. I walked straight to IT. Hey, Mark, I said, leaning on the edge of his cubicle. Did you guys change my permissions? He looked up, chewing gum, spinning slightly in his chair. Depends. What's your username again? I told him. He typed for a bit, squinting at his screen. Huh? He said. What? I asked. Request came through this morning. From your manager, he said. Says you're moving teams, limited need for legacy data. Standard security update, apparently. My throat went dry. Moving teams? He shrugged. That's what the note says. You know how it is. I just clicked the buttons. I thanked him and walked away, feeling like someone had reached inside my chest and unplugged something vital. By the time I sat back down, my irritation had settled into something heavier. That thick, choking sense of unfairness. I had done my job. I had pointed at a real problem. And somehow, in less than 24 hours, I'd become the risk. That night, I didn't stay late. I went home, microwaved leftovers I didn't taste, and sat in the dark with my laptop open in front of me. The company VPN login pulsed on the screen. I told myself I was done, that I would let it go. Keep my head down and let Mason play whatever game he was playing. It would have been easier, safer, quieter. But then I remembered his face when I said duplicate entries. Not surprised, not confused, scared. I connected to the VPN. I didn't have access to the main project folders anymore, but habits matter. 2 nights ago, when I'd first seen the discrepancy, I'd saved a local encrypted copy of the raw export and pushed a backup to my personal cloud, not company documents, just the CSV data I'd generated. It was a reflex. I always saved offline copies of tricky reconciliations while I worked in case the system crashed. This time, that reflex felt like the only piece of solid ground under my feet. I opened the file. Hundreds of lines, thousands of numbers. I filtered by vendor, by date, by adjustment type. Patterns began to rise like bruises under the skin. The same handful of vendors appearing over and over. Amounts just small enough to slip past casual review, just large enough to matter when you added them up. I cross-matched them against public data. Some vendors existed, some were shells. One didn't exist at all outside our system. I checked the timestamps again. Almost every questionable edit happened late, after 7, after 8, always routed through the same login, sometimes from the office IP, sometimes from a remote one assigned to an address I didn't recognize. The more I scrolled, the calmer I felt. That surprised me, but somewhere between line 842 and line 1 to 300, something in me clicked into place. This wasn't me seeing things that weren't there. This was me seeing exactly what someone counted on, nobody noticing. My whole life, I'd been the guy who let things slide to keep the peace. The kid who didn't argue with teachers. The coworker who took an extra task so someone else could go home early. The friend who stayed neutral. I always thought that made me easygoing. Staring at those numbers, I realized there's a difference between easygoing and easy to use. That night, I stopped being the person who looked the other way, just because someone in a nicer suit told me to. I closed the file, saved a fresh backup, then another, on a separate drive. Tomorrow, Mason would probably smile wider, speak softer, and tell more people I was overstressed and needed to focus on smaller tasks. Let him talk. I finally had something he didn't know I had. The next week didn't explode all at once. It cracked slowly, like ice breaking under steady pressure. Mason kept smiling that too smooth smile. But underneath it, something was unraveling. He moved differently, talked differently, kept glancing over his shoulder as if the walls had started whispering. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. It started on Monday morning. I walked into the office and felt the air shift the second I crossed the threshold. People weren't whispering anymore, they were watching. Not openly, corporate people never do anything openly, but with that sideways, nervous, do you know something? Kind of look. I'd become radioactive without doing a single thing, except noticing numbers. At 10:15, Mason pinged me on Teams. My office now? No punctuation. Never a good sign. His door was shut when I arrived. He waved me in without standing up. Papers were spread across his desk, but not in a productive way. More like someone had tried to organize chaos by shuffling it into new shapes. Close the door, he said. I did. He leaned back, clasping his hands behind his head, pretending to be relaxed. But his knee was bouncing under the desk. So, he exhaled. Upper management wants updates on the adjustments. The ones you flagged. My heartbeat slowed. Not sped up, slowed. Like my body was giving me space to pay attention. I thought they were aware, I said calmly. He hesitated. Too long. They are, but they want a more detailed summary. From me? No, he said quickly. From me, but I need your notes. That was the moment the floor cracked under him, because he didn't know I'd already backed up everything. He thought he could gather all the loose ends and shove them in a drawer before someone else opened it. What notes, specifically? I asked. His jaw twitched. Don't play games, Evan. I'm asking you which ones you need, I replied, steady. The raw logs? The filtered spreadsheets? The discrepancy analysis? The color drained from his face. He hadn't known those existed. You made analyses? I didn't answer. His panic answered for him. Look, he tried again, softer. You're misunderstanding a sensitive situation. These numbers, these vendors, they're part of a controlled offset strategy, directed from above. Someone in your position doesn't need to worry about it. There are fake vendors, I said quietly. His mouth opened, then shut. No script for that. Nothing rehearsed. That's a serious accusation, he said, voice dropping. It's a serious pattern, I corrected. He slammed a hand onto the desk. Not loud, but sharp. You don't know what you're talking about. But he knew I did. He stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out like the glass had answers. When he turned back, his expression was different. Not angry, not scared. Cornered. You need to hand over whatever you've collected. I didn't blink. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. The silence stretched. Two men in an office that suddenly felt too small. You're putting your job at risk, he said quietly. I met his eyes. You're putting the company at risk. He flinched. A tiny, involuntary jerk, like a man whose secret had just been spoken too close to his face. Evan, he said, lowering his voice again, these things have consequences. You're a smart guy. Don't be stupid for something that isn't your business. But that's the thing, I said. The moment you tied my name to those reports, it became my business. For a second, something like hatred flickered across his expression. Controlled hatred. The kind that develops in people who've always relied on hiding behind polished titles. He exhaled sharply. We're done here. He didn't fire me. He didn't threaten me. He didn't shout. He just dismissed me with the confidence of a man who believed he still had the higher ground. But he didn't know what was coming. That afternoon, something shifted in the noise of the office. Emails slowed. People walked faster. Doors shut more often. There was a ripple of tension moving through the floor, and it didn't come from me. At 2:40 p.m., Kira stopped by my desk. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hey, just so you know, Mason called a meeting with the directors today. He looked bad. How bad? I asked. She hesitated, like someone told him his house is on fire. I nodded, not surprised. Because earlier that morning, before Mason messaged me, I had submitted an anonymous compliance alert through the internal whistleblower channel. Not accusatory, not dramatic. Just the facts. Timestamps, entries, discrepancies, access logs. No conclusions, no names. Just enough truth to force someone higher up to look, and someone had looked. By late afternoon, the storm began. At 4:05 p.m., an email went out. Effective immediately, our compliance division will conduct a routine internal review of selected financial processes. Routine. The corporate equivalent of a fire alarm softened with pillows. 10 minutes later, IT pushed an update that logged everyone out for security sync. When I logged back in, my access looked the same, but I saw Mason walking across the floor, talking fast to someone from HR. His face looked tight, strained, pale. He didn't look at me. Not once. Around 5:20, as people packed their bags, I stayed seated, watching numbers scroll across my screen. I wasn't working. I wasn't pretending to work. I was simply waiting. The pieces were moving exactly the way they were supposed to. At 5:37, Mason stormed out of his office. Not walked. Stormed. His hand clenched around his phone. His tie loosened. His composure cracked. He stopped at my desk. You did something, he said. It wasn't a question. Did I? I asked. He leaned in, his voice a hiss. You have no idea what you've set in motion. He was wrong. I knew exactly. He straightened abruptly, trying to piece his mask back together. It didn't fit anymore. You think this is some victory? You think you're some hero? He asked. That was when I felt it. The small internal pop of clarity. The micro-catharsis I didn't even know I needed. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm an accountant. I follow numbers, and you left a trail. His nostrils flared. His eyes flickered with something desperate. They always get desperate right before the fall. He walked away without another word, fast, almost frantic. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I powered down my computer slowly, methodically, the same way I'd worked for years. Nothing dramatic. No visible triumph. I packed my bag, zipped it closed, and stood. The office was quiet. Too quiet. Not peaceful. Bracing. Something had snapped in the system, and no one could pretend not to hear it anymore. Not even Mason. On my way out, I passed the glass conference room. The blinds, usually open, were shut tight, but I could see shadows inside. 3, maybe 4 people, and one of them had Mason's posture. Stiff, cornered, head bowed slightly like he was trying to talk his way out of something he no longer controlled. I didn't slow down, I didn't stare, I didn't want to, because the truth was already in motion, and for the first time I wasn't chasing it, it was chasing him. The morning after the shadows gathered behind the conference room blinds, the office felt strangely light. Not cheerful, just emptied of something heavy. People spoke quietly, but the usual nervous glances weren't about me anymore. They were pointed past my desk, toward Mason's closed door. I didn't rush to find out what happened. I made my coffee, sat down, and opened a spreadsheet, unrelated to any of yesterday's chaos. The numbers glowed calmly on the screen, as if reminding me that math doesn't lie. People do. At 9:12, an email hit everyone's inbox. Effective immediately, Mason Hart will be taking a personal leave of absence. All inquiries related to financial workflows will be directed to compliance. No signature, no explanation, no timeline, the kind of message that says everything by saying nothing. 10 minutes later, a pair of compliance officers walked through the office. One middle-aged man with a stiff posture, and a younger woman with a tablet pressed against her chest. They weren't smiling, they weren't making conversation. They looked like people who showed up to do something final. I didn't look up as they passed my desk, but the woman paused for half a second as if checking a name on her screen. Then they kept walking. When they entered Mason's office, the door didn't close all the way. I didn't try to listen. I didn't need to. The tone was enough, low, clipped, procedural. His voice came twice, muffled and tight. No shouting, just the sound of a man realizing the ground had dropped out beneath him, and the fall had already begun. At 10:03, the officers walked out. Mason didn't follow. By noon, he was gone. No goodbye, no speech, no thanks for your hard work. Just an empty office and a badge turned in at reception. People whispered of course. Temporary? Investigated? Resigned? The rumors spun themselves into contradictory shapes. But the truth didn't need their help. The truth had been written in the numbers months ago. I ate my lunch alone at my desk, not because I was avoiding anyone, but because I didn't feel the need to move. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt unclenched, like someone had finally removed a hand from around my throat. Around 2, I was called into HR. The director, a man who always smelled like printer ink, gestured for me to sit. We reviewed the compliance alert, he began. We appreciate the professionalism and how it was submitted. You didn't assign motive. You didn't accuse anyone. You simply presented data. That's how it should be, I said. He nodded. We'll be conducting a full forensic audit. In the meantime, we'd like to restore your previous access and responsibilities, effective immediately. That's not necessary, I said quietly. He looked up. Sorry? I don't need my old cues back. Give them to whoever you want. I'll do what's assigned. He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to categorize me into a type of employee he recognized. He couldn't, and that was fine. You didn't ask for credit, he said. I didn't do anything extraordinary, I replied. I saw numbers that didn't make sense. HR people love closure, but he didn't get any from me. I left before he could repackage the situation into some inspirational corporate narrative. When I returned to my desk, my permissions refreshed automatically. Folders reappeared one by one like lights flickering back on after a storm. I opened a few, checked that everything looked intact, then closed them again. I wasn't interested in victory laps. Later that week, people softened around me. Quiet nods, small acknowledgments, a pastry left on my desk from someone who couldn't bring themselves to speak. I didn't need any of it. Respect given after fear isn't respect, it's relief. But the one person who didn't avoid me was Kira. She approached on Friday afternoon, clutching her notebook. I'm glad you're still here, she said. Why wouldn't I be? You know how this place is, she said. People disappear over less. I didn't do anything wrong. That's not always the point. I met her eyes. It was this time. She smiled, soft, uncertain, and left before the moment could grow into something heavy. That night, I went home early. Not because I was tired, but because I finally could. I cooked a real dinner, not leftovers from a rushed week. I opened a window. I listened to the street outside, cars, wind, distant voices. The world sounded normal again. The next Monday, an email arrived from compliance. Follow-up questions may be requested. Otherwise, no further action is needed from you. No further action. I closed the message and leaned back in my chair, letting the feelings settle. Not triumph, not vengeance. Just the kind of quiet you earn by walking through something ugly without breaking. In the afternoon, as I walked past Mason's old office, the lights were off. Someone had already removed his nameplate. The space looked strangely small without his presence, like the room had been pretending to be bigger while he was inside it. I did pause just once, with my hand on the door frame, not to gloat, not to reflect, just to acknowledge how fast a man can go from untouchable to gone the moment his lies run out of places to hide. On my way out of the building, the security guard nodded at me. I nodded back. Normal. Simple. The sky outside was a clean, cold blue, the kind you only get after a storm has drained everything out of the air. I walked to my car with no phone buzzing in my pocket, no weight between my shoulders, no one waiting to twist my words the next morning. For the first time in a long time, the ground felt steady. People think revenge is dramatic, explosive, loud. It isn't. Real revenge is a quiet room, a closed file, an empty office where a corrupt man used to sit. Real revenge is the moment you stop carrying someone else's mess. I drove home with the windows half open, the cool air filling the car. No rush, no tension, just the soft, steady calm of a life realigning itself. And somewhere behind me, in a place I no longer needed to look back at, the truth finished its work.